we're good. Well, welcome to the show, Mike. How you doing today?
I am doing really well. I appreciate it, John. How are you?
Very well, actually. It's morning here, afternoon for you, so I'm just sort of getting into my day, and I got a media interview after this, so that'll be fun. But yeah, look, in case people haven't noticed, we're talking about marketing ops today. But a little bit about you. Can you give us a really quick summary, like what you've been doing to come to the place where you're at today?
Goodness, the quick summary on where I got to where I got. Ooh, all right. So I got my start in ad tech many moons ago, which gave me a little flavor for HTML and some basics of code, and that propelled me into a level of confidence that said maybe I could learn how to write, build an email and maybe build a website. And then that took me into the world of technical marketing. Got my first gig as hey, can you help us figure out how to send a newsletter once a month? And that spiraled into that job that was started out as a newsletter once a month job, turned into um, two migrations between CRM and marketing automation platforms, and the rest is sort of history. um, so I ended up in marketing ops. I did a bit of growth marketing along the way. I've been sort of a manager of getting largely B2B SaaS organizations, sort of their tech stack up and running, conferences, you name it, getting us to and from the events. And as I ventured on through my career, I always aspired to want to build something. I didn't know what it would be, but I knew if I fell in love with it, it would be the thing that I wanted to do. Lo and behold, every single idea I ever had was oriented around community,
Mhm.
and and I didn't know it at the time. But now this space has really grown. The marketing operations professional community, otherwise known as the MoPros, is the official community of marketingops.com. And we're working hard to elevate the function of marketing operations every single day.
Great. Okay, I love it. So you've basically had your hands dirty into the mix, executing these things, and that's where you are today. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yep. I've
Well,
been in the weeds and now I'm pulling everybody together.
okay, well, great. Let's just start, like, because I think there's a lot of misinterpretation around this. What is marketing ops? If you had to explain it really simply.
Ah, we joke about this all the time in the community. Like if you had to describe this to your, you know, 5-year old, which I have one of those,
Yep.
what do you do? Or to your family, your parents? Look, marketing operations is a conductor. So in the orchestra, you've got someone sort of queuing up when the band will do the crescendo and all the things, right? At the end of the day, a marketing operations professional is a conductor of people, process, and technology, and they are orienting and aligning all of those things to help a business move forward for their go-to-market strategy.
So, what do you think?
That's the
That's a
best
great
way I could
answer.
possibly describe it.
That's a great answer. I think you said three things there: people, process, and technology. Right? I can see, I can predict what you're going to say to this question, but like, also, what does it get confused with sometimes, like mistakenly?
Um, Oh goodness. Like what does marketing ops get confused with?
Yeah.
It gets confused. It gets confused with someone that just is like a generalist marketer. Like, for example, the ability to run paid ads, for example. Like, just because you know how those systems connect and how to measure the success potentially of a campaign that is a paid campaign doesn't mean that you are a demand gen marketer. It doesn't mean that you're somebody who wants to come up with all the creative ad copy and all of the things that go into the bidding strategy and the keywords you should bid on and all the things that go into the sort of paid ads landscape. So marketing ops will often get confused with sort of the marketeer functions, the demand gen functions, like someone who is a creative executor on creating net new email marketing campaigns. That's generally not your job. Your job is to be able to segment the list, measure the list, deploy it, make sure it gets delivered, make sure the data, once it's actually delivered, gets passed to the right people in the right amount of time. there's a lot of orchestration that goes around all of that, and enabling the professionals that are doing that kind of marketing with the right information to help them go make the right next decision, or enabling your sales reps to be able to engage with your potential customer at the right time. That's your job. It's orchestrating that movement of that customer journey, but it shouldn't be confused with the marketing activities that often get lumped into the job description.
Okay, and also I think from my personal experience, some people say they're doing ops when they're just installing a CRM, for example, and that's all they know, or some kind of stack, but they're just like a technical implementation person. I think, perhaps marketing ops is a bit bigger than that.
I would agree. I think marketing ops is more than just a technical implementation. I think it goes back to the comment around people, process, and technology. You can implement a CRM, but if you don't do that with any level of strategic guidance, you're going to end up very quickly in a place where you have no idea what's going on. Your data is a mess. It's not working for you. It's like sort of working against you. And so, yeah, I think a marketing ops person really comes in with a strategic lens to say, okay, well, you want to add a new field to your database to track someone's, I don't know, location, their company location. It's like, why? What are you going to do with that? How is that going to be used? And those questions usually come up from.
Okay, well, that's a good segue into maybe some of the symptoms that people need marketing ops when they perhaps don't know it. Can you explain maybe some sort of telltale signs that you need ops, and perhaps what you do?
That's a tough one for me. Like, really, you need a marketing ops strategist at a bare minimum. Like the moment you're thinking about scaling beyond just yourself. So if you're going to implement a sales team of any kind, right? Like if you're a one person shop, you don't need someone to do marketing ops for you. Like you could just run haphazardly through whatever tools you want. But if you have a goal where you want to scale yourself and maybe start moving a little faster, more efficiently, um, you want to be able to like segment your database or even enable a sales rep to take on some of your responsibilities and start building a real business. Whether you're a SaaS business or a services business, you need to bring in a marketing ops person. But again, don't expect them to be an SEO expert.
Yeah.
Some might be SEO experts, but generally they're not going to be. And so like telltale signs are like I am looking to now scale beyond what I've kind of got as a status quo, and or I've already reached a point where I've hired salespeople and I've got sort of a team in place, but I don't really know what's working for my business, or I would like to understand what's working for my business. I have a sense of it, I have a hunch, but I need to validate that. And how do I do that? And so if you haven't established those data pipelines on how to measure the success of your growing organization, there could be a lot of like technical debt in place where you now have to go get a marketing ops professional or rev ops professional for that matter to basically say like, I need you to survey the landscape of what I got going on here. And now tell me, where did I miss, right? What am I missing? And I need the ability as a leader in this organization to say, here's sort of like what's working and what's maybe not. And if you don't have the tooling in place and the foundational layer that's been built right from the get-go, then you should go get somebody. And if you're looking to do that, you should just get somebody sooner rather than later. So like, the short answer is you need a marketing ops person right away.
Okay, good. Look, I have personally been involved in some of these implementation things for very early stage companies, medium stage, that are sort of getting traction or wanting to build out their sales team a bit more, all the way through to larger companies with established process, but perhaps lagging on some of the tech to, help the efficiency side of things. So I find they're all in very different sort of stages. But if we just go back a bit to someone who's just getting started out, maybe it is them, they're doing sales, and they want to make that first step. Maybe they're looking at making their first marketing hire to take over some of the, I don't know, writing and posting or whatever it is, and then they're going to hire a first salesperson. Maybe they're looking at getting an agency or a digital agency to help them out or something. That sort of very early stage. Where would a marketing ops person fit into that, and why is it important?
Really good question. So your marketing hire, let's just put it in the context of your marketing hire or your agency hire who's going to help you with these things. I think ultimately, like having gone through building sort of a business now around everything that we do, we sort of function at marketingapps.com. We function as a quasi B2C, a quasi B2B, a membership sort of e-commerce organization, and a marketing agency all at once, because of the way we have these relationships with all these different sort of entities within our ecosystem. And the thing that it really rings true through the way we've been able to continue to keep the lights on in our organization is it's about process, right? And so if you are about to make that first hire, whether it's sales or marketing, but let's stay on marketing, and you say, hey, I really need you to be able to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, you should really be capable of articulating what your expectations of that process looks like. And ultimately, it should be starting with the end in mind, right? So what do you want to see? Do you want to be able to report on the success of this person's ability to send 5 email campaigns a month? Do you want to be able to just see if that revenue is coming from those email campaigns or from the paid ads or what have you? By starting with what do I want to see by the end of this engagement, and how do I want that person to be able to engage with me, you'll be able to implement a process, right? And ideally, like, document it step by step. What do you expect? And a marketing operations person would be able to come in and say, first of all, they'd be probably over the moon that you documented how you want a process to work. And then second of all, they'd be able to say, okay, I see that you want to be able to, send 5 campaigns out a month in the email database. I need to now know, who do you want to send that to? Okay. Oh, you want to send it to somebody of a particular, persona or demographic or region or territory. Great. Well, here's what you're going to need in order for us to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Right. But you can, if you don't try to think through what you want at the end of the engagement, and you don't try to document a process to get there, you're going to find that you can hire anybody you want, and you're going to be left at the end of the day going, well, was that worth it? Did I make the right hire? Right? Like, is all that activity resulting in anything? And maybe it does. Maybe your revenue goes up, but you don't know why. Like, which of your buyers are buying from you? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point.
Marketing person fits in really nicely there.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point here. But I think marketing ops is one of those invisible glues. If done really well, it sort of just goes under the radar. Things just work seamlessly and scale really well, and you don't have problems. But I think sometimes, because its effect is so intangible and sometimes less obvious, it can be not valued. And another thing also, if you come from a situation, especially in marketing, where it's been outsourced to agencies or third parties, they're the ones with the operational process. So then, unless you've ever worked in an agency where things do have to scale, and it is very complex, a lot of coordination goes on, and you're not seeing that, you're not appreciating it, and then you try to bring something back in-house, you realize, how complex it actually is, and you need this process. You can't just buy a tool, start executing, and bang, everything works. There's a lot of the glue that needs to pull that together. So I think, do you think it's sort of like devalued sometimes in people's minds because it's been outsourced for so long?
I think it can be devalued. I think sometimes it's because it's been outsourced. Sometimes it's because just the nature of like the things are working, and you don't realize how much goes into keeping the system sort of up and running. That definitely sort of like that invisible work that happens is often a bit, it's very difficult. Like in a marketing operations function, showing what it is that you're working through, like we have to orchestrate our own sort of processes around like, what's the intake flow for actually getting a campaign out the door? How long does that happen? How many of those happen in a certain amount of time? Are there any errors or integration failures that we're fixing? The reality is that uh, all of these things require people to make them all work, right? And I think like the most basic example, again, sort of like going back to that idea of like documentation, is, hey, if you want to know, how fast your customers are coming in and then becoming paid customers. So let's use it in a B2B context. There's probably some stage gates that you could start to instrument, because like in reality, like, you meet somebody, you shake their hand, you go out to coffee with them. There's a lot of steps that come along the way of trying to nurture someone to become your new customer. And if you instrument the stage gates, you can actually understand how long it takes you to close a net new customer. And so again, that idea of like, hey, I need to document my expectations, and I want to have some visibility into all of that. Those require people, right? Like that requires a conversation. And the conversation is, hey, so when your sales rep picks up the phone for the very first time, and then by the fifth phone call, what would you like to know about that transaction? Would you like to know that there were 5 phone calls? Like, there's no part of that just magically happens. Like, we have to get on the phone. I have to ask you these questions, and you have to be able to know what you're looking for, right? So anyway, I keep
No, I like it.
harping on this idea that it's like it requires people.
Yeah, well, and people are messy. People are inaccurate. They're unpredictable. So they're not like machines. You need to herd cats sometimes, and someone has to herd them. But I think also there's a larger point here, which is, and this has occurred to me more recently. An organization that had a head of operations, in a senior position, and then when it came to marketing, they hadn't were very hands off. There was no operations at all. It was like, oh, well, marketing handles that. Whereas operations tends to filter down to every other department traditionally. So why would that occur? Is that normal in your sort of field as well, or do you notice that happen?
Sorry. So like,
Like, why
ask
doesn't the
that one
head
more
of
time for me.
operations at a company go into the marketing and sales and growth ops side of things? That if you ever get a traditional sort of operations person, they tend not to get involved in that
Mm,
whatsoever. Why is that?
yeah, I think it's yeah, I mean it's a really good question. So like we're sort of making the argument that the marketing operations professionals have this really unique survey of the landscape of all of the technology and sort of inputs, all the data inputs that help sort of usher a customer journey along its path, right? And uh, there's also this reality that like a business's operational procedure isn't something that a marketing operations person ever needs to understand either. Like I don't need to really know how employees get paid or how they get onboarded or any of the sort of like,
HR and
business
stuff like
lines
that.
and like the way that
Yeah.
the business, like all of those pieces of an operational flow don't necessarily need to be understood, but somebody does need to run those. There's a reason why there's a head of operations and a COO for that matter. But what's interesting is where I and a handful of folks I think are thinking this now. The COO I think is really due for a shakeup. I think the COO function will likely end up becoming this orchestration role that understands all of the data inputs, inclusive of some of the core business operations pieces, and how all of those sort of fit together. because the next time you want to enter a new market or what have you, there's going to be limitations around the whole operational infrastructure and how that gets. Do you need more salespeople? Do you need more marketers? How does sort of all of it fit together? All that stuff. But I don't think today's operators, really any CEO or COO or CMO, most of them just don't have, we're starting to have those functions show up from people who have been doing this type of work, this marketing ops, rev ops type of work for the last, 10 to 20 years. They're starting to hit those roles now. But prior to that, like, this was greenfield stuff, right? Like, we've only been at this for like maybe like a better part of a decade, like a little over a decade, of really calling it marketing operations. And so that's why I think you don't see the heads of operations sticking their nose into this space, because like they've never had to. Like, it's still totally a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, I think so too. And just coming back to that, then, let's just say we're a bit of a larger company, medium-sized or a large-sized company, maybe, and we've got a lot of functions outsourced. We've got multiple agencies, maybe someone handling some of the digital media, someone handling traditional media buys, a creative agency, maybe some social agency doing some other things. So you've got multiple kind of people with fingers in the pie, and they're all reporting back to the CMO or the head of marketing. And that person's trying to compile all these results together, and then report that up the chain. Where most of it is outsourced, right? Your operations or execution operations is outsourced, but where does a markups person need to come in that kind of situation, even if you're outsourcing everything?
I would say, yeah, I've been talking to a lot of our community members about this topic of centralized versus decentralized
Yep.
versus like hybrid marketing operations infrastructure and teams. And so you were talking about largely a decentralized model, where you've got lots of outsourced sort of talent, maybe some in-house, and those kinds of things. And so uh, a marketing operations professional could step into a couple of different, there's about four pillars that are like very popularized by an agency called the Tumos, that like are sort of core to the functions of marketing operations. But I could see a marketing ops professional stepping into a decentralized organization and saying, okay, we need to understand the just sort of the go to market motion. Like, what is the campaign request queue? How does that work get divvied out? How do we know when sales should engage once a campaign has been pushed out the door? Sort of that ticket log queuing and orchestration of moving all of those parts around, inclusive of, once the data is captured, who needs to know about that data and where does it need to go. And so they can come in and try to get their arms around how do all of these teams sort of interact in a way where there's not duplicative work or overlapping work, which causes a really bad customer experience too. Um, and I think it sort of doesn't matter which model you go with, but like that's sort of the function of, right. Like, I got into an argument once with a leader about whether or not a marketing operations professional cares about the customer at the end of the day. And like, I think they're one of the core roles that says like actually I'm looking at all of this because it's a part of the customer journey. Like everything we do in marketing operations is about like, how does the customer's interaction happen within our organization. So I think they're one of the more customer oriented roles, even though they're not customer facing, which is
Yeah.
super ironic.
No, I mean, I had this discussion yesterday around brand, and like, ultimately who should sort of have ultimate ownership of the brand. It was like, well, it should be the executive CEO, but the brand involves everyone. So like, everyone expresses the brand within the company. It shouldn't be just lumped into a sole responsibility. Yeah. So it's a similar kind of vein of thought. But on that note, some people have everything internal, some people outsource everything. And then you mentioned there's hybrid. What are the trade-offs we need to know with each of those three options that you would know from having sort of experienced these different systems with your work experience?
Uh, it's so the answer is that it really depends, like everything in marketing operations. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing the research piece now with the community members is that we want to try to create the it's a how do you show somebody that's reading sort of like this report, right? At the end of the day, like why would one model sort of supersede the other, or what are the core benefits or trade-offs that you have to keep in mind? Um, I can't pretend to know all of them for every industry. I can tell you that there's a mix of internal politics for sure. So when you go into a centralized model, it'll feel like someone's sort of the controller. There, you can get to a place where it might feel like you're not on the team, um, but there's a lot more control. And as soon as the executives need to know sort of what's happening, there's at least a system in place to help answer those questions. In a decentralized model, it might feel a little bit more free flowing and friendly and fun, but you can end up in a place where there's a little bit of this like credit. And I don't get me started on the word credit. It is not a bad word. It is a very good word, but a lot of people use it as the wrong word. It's a 4-letter word. And you get into this game of like who did what. And so the executives are like, oh, like which channel is generating the most revenue. And, like, not to say that that doesn't happen in a centralized model too, but like when you have these decentralized team members like sort of able to go deploy a campaign all by themselves, um, it can just get really messy really really fast and create a lot of chaos. Lots of opportunity for broken systems and broken integrations. And then that hybrid model is a little bit of both. You're doing a little bit of enablement to allow people to sort of operate, but within boundaries that you've established, and it can bring together the best of both worlds, but allow you to scale when you need to. So it's like I would say hybrid allows you to scale in a controlled fashion, right? Like you've instrumented your systems to like your core systems are centralized, but if I need to be able to do more, I can bolt on another service provider, and I know how they're going to fit into my ecosystem.
Yeah, good.
But again, to each their own. We're talking about, I've talked to people who run marketing ops for global organizations with teams all over the world. And then I've talked to startups, and each of them have a different answer as to why that's a better a better model for them.
Okay, great. What about, let's just say, your specialties, as you mentioned, sort of B2B services. I only deal with services. I don't deal with products. So, this episode is mostly about services. In that context, what is your marketing ops MVP? Like you starting a company or whatever. Can you just like explain the things you need to have as a B2B service company at the very initial sort of early stages, then maybe something a bit in the middle, and then maybe something when you're getting really, really crazy and big?
Yeah, gosh, I would say B2B service company. I would say your MVP is like a CRM, right? And like some basic like tracking of life cycle, sort of maybe a deal or opportunity oriented sort of process. So you're focused on sort of the potential to generate revenue at what would be considered in HubSpot a deal object, or in Salesforce a opportunity object, and then orchestrating your sort of go to market motion around the people that need to be involved in order to help close the deal. And so thinking about what are the data points that I really want to track. I want to know who's associated to what companies, who's associated to what deals. And so some basics around that object orientation in the CRM. So like, how do I see how I can interact with these potential new opportunities? That's your MVP. Like you just at least use the objects the way that they're built, right? Like don't even go too crazy on custom properties. And then as you get a little further along, start working through um, the orchestration of, okay, now I really want to see deal progression, and I want to see the momentum of my business based on these attributes. And so an example might be, hey, by the time this person has booked a phone call with me and I log my first meeting with them, I want to move that status of that deal into, qualified or stage one or whatever you end up wanting to call it. But there's some sort of orchestration around moving and momentum and some reporting that comes in. And then the later stage stuff is like full on, attribution, who's, and it, by the
Sales
way, like for
enablement,
the
sort of
listeners out there, like
automation.
attribution's never, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like attribution's never going to be perfect, but there's a whole piece around like sales enablement, automation, getting people like the right information at the right time and enabling them to sort of move fluidly within, the confines of like not mucking up your data. Um, you
And,
probably have like a lot more
and I
to
think, if I'd add
advise.
something right at the beginning as well, I think, and this is where marketing almost maybe blends into some of the IT systems and other operational systems of the company. But what I've noticed is some sales teams, they start spamming out of their company email domain, and then it ends up getting blacklisted, and then that stuffs up your newsletter delivery
Mm-hmm.
and everything like that. So I think there almost needs to be an element of that sort of domain level web infrastructure or IT infrastructure at the beginning as well, at some sort of level of someone that understands how that works and how salespeople like to spam email as much as they like dialing phone numbers, or
Yeah.
not like dialing phone numbers. So I think there's a bit of
Yep.
that side of
Yeah.
things as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game to play. Like marketing ops professionals are often, oriented around some level of IT. Email deliverability and email sending reputation is definitely like one of the core principles of a marketing automation sort of platform. But that does mean you need to be very acutely aware of, hey, like if we just enable our reps to just start sending email in, mass fashion and blasting people, we're going to end up in a really bad spot really fast. But like again, that doesn't mean that a marketing ops person necessarily needs to know how to provision DKIM records and SPF records and set up the email sending infrastructure. I might know how to do that. It doesn't mean that I should. It doesn't mean that it's my responsibility either. But at least you know that you should be asking for someone to set it up the right way. So
Yeah, and I think this brings us to an interesting point. Perhaps sometimes the way marketing tech is sold, especially CRMs, it can kind of dupe, I think, the buyers if they haven't been through this into a false sense of capability and security, perhaps. So, the dream is that, hey, the CRM will do everything. Get it off the shelf, just connect
yeah,
your domain, click a couple of buttons, and bang, it'll start. Money will start flowing in. Like that's the kind of way that they're positioned. In my experience, there's a lot of implementation work that has to go, very technical work and coordination, and you've got to set up your own sort of processes within that. And a lot of the stuff you got to do yourself. And that is way more costly than, a 50, 100, 200 or $1,000 a month license to the software itself. If you had to cost your time and energy and rework and everything like that. So, do you find that as well? And what other sort of myths do you want to bust around some of this off the shelf MarTech?
yeah. I mean, I think I wrote about this. I don't even know. Like, it feels like 2 decades ago, but probably wasn't. But definitely a long time ago. I could find it on my LinkedIn profile, but there's no autopilot in any of this stuff. There isn't a magic button or a magic switch that you can flip and like all of this stuff works. We started this conversation at the idea of it takes people to orient the process and the technology and the people that sort of go into that. And and yeah, like there is no tool that you're going to be able to buy that you can't like you you can't just turn it on and expect it's going to do some magical things for you. There's a lot of stuff that'll help you do fast and a little bit easier. But my number one piece of advice to every sort of entrepreneur, marketer, business professional out there is that like if there's a tool at your fingertips, like spend some time trying to understand how it works, because once you learn a little bit more about how it works and you don't just expect that it's going to do all these things for you willy-nilly, you'll start to figure out how to scale yourself a lot faster. And I think that's the biggest myth, is that like somehow buying the tool means you instantly achieve scale for yourself, but the reality is like you still have to go learn it. Like I don't know. It's like learning to ride a bike. Like you, once you learn how to ride the bike and you learn how to do it well, you can start pedaling really fast and you can get somewhere faster. But at first, maybe you're a little wobbly, and like if you don't keep trying to figure it out, you're never going to get to where you want to go. It's the same thing for pretty much every other tool, right? Like you get a tool, you've never used it before, you better figure out what it can do so that you can start going faster.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good analogy. Yeah, I've just seen this like happen so many times. I had a client a little while back. In the second year of operation, they're on the fourth CRM, and I sort of said to him like, "It's not your CRM. Like, stop changing CRMs." You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
which is interesting
it's
because I
not.
think there's a strategic layer, a layer of strategy, and we're talking about strategy here on this podcast. But I think there's a layer of strategy that sort of then needs to be interpreted down to a tactical, operational, functional sort of level. So like, hey, what's your goal here? Oh, we want to get sales. Okay. So to get sales, we need to get customers. To get customers, we need to get customers that are in market, that are ready to buy our product. So there's got to be some kind of targeting, qualification kind of strategy out there, a bit of product market fit, make sure you're not selling a lemon. Like there's all these other sort of layers that go into the success. And the tool will help you scale that success. But there's just some things that I think you need to manually figure out the messy way just by selling it, if you know what I mean, like manually get on the phone calls, reverse engineer that pitch, you know what I mean, like handle the objections, write a list of objections down
Mm-hmm.
on a piece of paper, like create that feature or get rid of a feature that you have in your product, like so you got some sort of like fit. And then when that's sort of all working, that's when you kind of start to scale with systems and get more people coming in, and then you've got more complexity. But the point is, I think sometimes people buy the software thinking it's going to solve those bigger fundamental kind of business model issues. So what do you think about those necessary meta strategy that flows then down into operations?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think you called it out, right? Like, a really great example of that is like when you were saying, "Hey, what are some of the objections that someone is providing to me on this engagement?" Right? Well, you're hearing it. The question is would you want to orient your business and orchestrate your business process around the types of objections that you're hearing? And so a solution to the problem might be by having heard a consistent number of objections to my sales process. I know that there are a few key plays that I need to make in order to help, you know, take that customer and point him, potential customer, and point him in a new direction. Um, and so a system, there, there's this possible thing that you could do with these technologies, which is like, okay, cool. If I'm on a call and I was able to click a button that said, "Here's the objection I just heard," and I could follow the next play in the playbook on how to handle that objection, could I then take someone who's pretty junior in my company as a sales rep and help them have a constructive conversation to help me close business faster? Could I take, going back to what I was saying earlier, if I wanted to take pieces of my job and start to scale myself, if I write down my process, I can probably find ways to train somebody to do something, and then I can bolt on technology to enable them to not have to be an expert in my field, but to make them successful in trying to deal with the same things, like the 20 or 30 years of knowledge that you might have in a service function, right? You should be able to give somebody tools to be able to help them close deals, and they'll get better at it over time. But by providing them with that experience, you went through, you documented these objections, you orchestrated a process around how to handle them, and then you instrumented a tool to be able to let them follow this like really simple playbook. You don't even have to go build technology for that right away. You could just document it in a Google Doc and then like let somebody follow along. Okay, if they say this, go to section 2. Right? And eventually you could get to a place where a marketing ops professional can say, "I can show you how to do that with, ABC tools probably all inside of one tech stack, and it's all reportable.
Yeah, great. So I think, the point you're raising there is that when you start to sort of do this operational stuff, you do need to do that groundwork first, and then that sort of forms the briefing process to someone like you, perhaps. So, like, if you're going in without that, that would probably be one of your first steps is like documenting, observing what's going on, extracting data, and then you use that to then inform the solution, right? Is that sort of how you do some of your engagements? Or?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the type of engagement, it could be, we were talking about like what makes somebody, if you think about lifecycle management, what makes this contact, this person that I'm speaking to, a qualified lead. Some of that might be like the fact that you could follow sales methodologies like budget authority, need, and timing, the BANT framework. And so by getting the sales rep to answer these questions, we can move that customer along to the next stage because they fit the right criteria. And so, there's discovery of like, is that a model you want to follow? And yeah, if it doesn't exist today, it's like getting someone, whether it's a sales rep or a business owner, to start thinking about, well, what do you expect to happen here? And tell me about your process. Like, how do you normally engage with clients? Do they book a call with you? Do they go to your website? Like let's go through it. But the more of that you've already done ahead of time as a business owner or a business unit owner of some kind, the more success you'll have faster. It's more about the speed,
Hmm.
because you've done about a lot of the legwork on like, now I just really want to figure out a way to like scale.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Hey,
that's typically a good discovery
I
process.
think this raises a good point. Sometimes I've seen here the way the implementation works around a lot of these tech stacks is that they'll have an agency, digital provider of some sort, or they'll make a deal with the tech vendor themselves, like Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever. That team will then refer them to a local agency or something, or the local agency will be reselling that software on behalf of that vendor, and then they are either going to help you implement, or they'll outsource to an implementation company that will come in and sort of do that. Now, that happens a lot with the enterprise, right? Like, so the consultants will come in, they'll be reselling Salesforce. They go, hey, you should get Salesforce. And then when it comes to like actually doing it, they'll walk away and go, hey, talk to this company. They'll handle it all for you, right? What are the dangers with that sort of model versus hiring maybe someone independent like you at an operational level?
Um, I think like an independent consultant versus like an agency is like not too dissimilar from each other, truthfully. The agency, like, and some of this like depends on the tech stack that you have. But an agency might want to instrument your tech stack, like a Marketo environment, for example. Setting up a Marketo instance could be very particular to the way that agency functions. And it may not be the way that other folks in a marketing ops role would normally do it. And it's neither good or bad. It's just that they're going to sort of architect programs around the way that they operate. You touched on this a little bit earlier, right? Um, and when that happens, that sort of means like, if you end up hiring somebody later to come take over for this stuff, they're going to have to get trained on the way that things work, which is true no matter what. But if it's really unique to the way that the agency sort of does things, and this operator that you brought into your business as your new employee has just never seen that before, there's going to be this like friction and this like, I really want to change everything, or I can adapt but it's not really what I want to do kind of problem. I think an independent consultant may or may not fall into that bucket as well, right? They might have their own way of doing things, that they follow a playbook for. They may also just say, no, we'll just be totally bespoke, and I'm going to try to guide you through like a process that can be taught to anybody. It just really depends. I don't know that any one of them is going to necessarily like be good or bad. It's just I think there is to a degree, there's probably a slightly higher likelihood of having an agency like try to fit you into the way that they implement technology versus the way that an independent consultant might try to like be a bespoke sort of curator of your technology stack. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
I don't
makes
know.
sense.
That's probably I'm probably casting, some agency out there is probably like, F you, Mike. Like, that's
Yeah,
not
I'm
true.
sure. Hey, but I think they
I don't
raised a
know.
good point. I did see a guy that you talked to me about, Franz Rimmersma. Is that how you say his name?
Right. Reimersma.
Rimmersma.
Yeah.
He did this
Franz. He's
interesting
great.
poll recently. He said, "How many marketing ops staff members does your marketing team have?" So he was trying to poll people like, "Hey, how big is your team before you need to have at least one marketing ops person? How big do you think that team should be before you make your first marketing ops hire? Whether it's a full time or part time or some sort of like more than casual employee."
I would say it's your first or second hire on a marketing team. That would be my argument. It's surprising. There's a gentleman by the name of Dave Gerhardt that a lot of people follow.
Yes.
Pretty popular marketer. Is only like, well, it feels like it wasn't that many months ago. It might have been 6 months or more ago, but he actually came out and said like one of the first hires I would make is a marketing operations professional. So I'm not the only one saying that.
And he's a like he comes from a
And there's a lot of
copywriting
good
background
reasons for
too.
it.
Like he was a
But
writer or a creator. So he doesn't even come from a markups background. So
yeah,
that was why it was even more surprising.
yeah, he came out and said that, and we were like, a number of us were like, of course, yes, like, praise be to Dave G. Like, this is great. But yeah, typically that wasn't necessarily the case before. But um, you probably wouldn't hire the person to do the drywall before the blueprints were up for your house. And so, try to figure out who's going to lay that foundation before you can start building the home, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a
Look,
marketing
I
ops
think my
person.
counter argument to that would be some firms that are on the smaller side just get anyone in to try and get any kind of traction just to test out the validity of their business model. Like, so they'll get some kind of performance marketer in to like just try and get
Totally.
some leads and try and close them, like, and they don't kind of care about laying the foundations. But then I think if I was going to rebut that, I would say as soon as you got traction, or preferably beforehand, but
Yeah.
get traction first, and then architect the blueprint straight away. Once you got that validation, because it's going to get messy, if you know what I mean. And like I've made the mistake before. We just go, oh, let's outsource to another agency. Let's get a CRM, and then it's like, oh wow, we need like another team member just to manage all this admin and operational stuff. That's like needs maintenance every single day. You got to train your sales team to like, oh, how do you add a qualification criteria to this? And you need someone on hand pretty much all the time to deal with that, or clean up the data, or like create a dashboard at least, and all these kind of things, or check that the email's not blacklisted, every week or something. You need a constant processes for this kind of stuff, I found. Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Totally. I
Hey,
agree.
so another thing on that same person that I just mentioned, Franz, I'll just call him Franz. He had this interesting article he wrote
Yep.
in 2019. I know you've written about this as well, but he said there's 3 reasons why MarTech platforms mark the end of enterprise suites. And I think if some people are listening right now that might be on these enterprise suites, and each year, I know the chief MarTech guy, Scott Brinker, does this mapping of all the new MarTech that's out there. It just grows exponentially every year. And there's just like more and more and more
Yeah, the
tools.
new one just came out yesterday.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like, I remember when it first started, I could actually read the logos, and now it's just, you got to zoom in quite a bit. And there's like all these different categories. But I think, can you explain to us what the difference between Enterprise Suite is and what he means here by the rise of MarTech platforms?
Yeah, I don't remember the context of the article entirely, but if I was to surmise, based on sort of the context of what you're sharing right now, there's in an enterprise sort of Well, there's two different lenses on this one, right? There's the enterprise platform that is sort of bespoke, like custom built enterprise capabilities, right? Like you're building your own sort of bespoke go to market technologies, and I was really surprised to find companies still do this. There's a lot of value in it. Don't get me wrong. Like when you're sort of the whole, like the owner of the entire sort of tech stack that you're building, you're building it for yourself. There's a lot of incredible value for that, but it does come at the cost of potentially slowing you down. Mm-hmm. And so I could see it through the lens of like, hey, the enterprise platforms are going to change a lot because all of this MarTech that's out there allows people to move a lot more quickly, and potentially like enter new markets faster, test and iterate and validate that their new offerings are the right offerings. And I think Scott Brinker refers to them as it's like citizen builders or citizen developers. Essentially this like no code, low code environment that we're all in now, where you can sort of like build these bespoke like connections between all these different tools. They allow you to sort of like create this Frankenstack that lets you, like anyone who's a pretty low code, like not a developer, deploy new campaigns into new markets. If you figure out how they all can kind of connect together. That also comes with risk. I'm seeing it now in an engagement that I'm in right now. And, there's all these product people and these sort of go-to-market marketers, and they're using, some iPaaS solution to move data back and forth between all these SaaS platforms that are out there in the cloud. And their data engineers are sitting there going like, why, like, and I, as the consultant in this engagement, I'm going, why is this not all centralized into Snowflake or whatever, ETL, CDP they have to be able to then orchestrate it back out to the right tools and all this stuff? And the answer is that nobody owns the architecture or the marketecture of the sort of go-to-market framework. And so, yeah, like MarTech can be the death of this, but they cause lots of other problems too. And again, it just comes back to the point, like you need someone or many someones to sit there and try to create the right people, process, and technology that's right for your business in your go-to-market motion.
Okay. Yeah, I think he was also making the point around, the rise of no code and, these connectors like, Zapier and all these other kind of API connectors or whatever you want to call them, that perhaps you don't have to buy an off the shelf kind of enterprise level suite that does everything. Like you don't have to buy all Salesforce's whole stack and only use Salesforce. You're a bit more free to maybe start with a core CRM and then tack on these other things and customize it, like you said, the way you want. But obviously the trade-off is that there needs to be, maintenance and some sort of like process that makes sure that all is working and operating efficiently.
Yeah, when I when I go to like I don't know, there's a restaurant here called Chipotle. I don't know if they're I don't know how global they are, to be honest with you. But there's a place here called Chipotle, and you come in line and you get to pick your type of protein, whether it's vegan, vegetarian, or a meat-based product, and then you move along the line and you get to build your own thing. And it's kind of like there's a hidden menu. Like I could do a quesarito and like they put cheese and then it's wrapped in cheese and all these other things, right? But I'm the person who's orchestrating my journey on what I want my meal to look like. I can only imagine what would happen if I basically gave everybody like one job to just like pick one meal and say, whatever one you think should go in there next, would I like what was delivered? Maybe. but since I'm in full control over my meal, I know I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
And so, I think like I'm full of analogies today, apparently. But I think like if I was to just give that up to somebody else to figure out how to make my burrito and everybody gets to pick a piece of it, like I don't know. I don't know if what I'm going to get is going to be very good.
No, you'll get a strange
I also don't know what it's going to cost me. So somebody was like, hey, add double meat. And the other person was like, add every single topping, extra hot sauce on top. And then the burrito's a $20 burrito.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And you
yeah.
get food poisoning, and you die. Worst case scenario.
Yeah,
Um,
like, oh my god, I can't even eat this thing. It's
okay.
double wrapped. Ugh. Anyway.
No, I think that was really good. Okay, well, I think it was a really good crash course into marketing ops. Just quick fire questions. If someone wants to get in touch with you, you really like what we're talking about, like your vibe, what's the best method?
Uh, just get me on LinkedIn. I'm Mike D as in David Rizzo. So /in/Mike D Rizzo. You can find me with that handle pretty much everywhere, but I'm really only on
Okay,
LinkedIn.
great.
So
And
LinkedIn's a good spot.
perfect. And what's a book that you've read recently? It could be related to this topic or not. That's really sort of changed your thinking for the better.
Um, oh gosh, I'm totally blanking on the name of this book right now.
I could look it up.
It's goodness. It has to do with it's competing against luck.
Ooh.
Is the book. But it's like the jobs to be done framework, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And my goodness, like my brain was on fire the moment that I started reading that book.
Oh, it's
I
Clayton
have it physical
Christensen.
copy, and I have the Clayton Christensen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Competing against luck is wonderful. I recommend it to everybody, especially like if you're sort of in the realm of like entrepreneurialism of any kind. But even as an entrepreneur, like it gives you this wonderful perspective of like how to be an innovator or like think about your customer and your competitors in a totally different way. Um, anyway, super super good.
Great. Okay. Awesome. And what about a meme or a quote that makes you laugh every time because it's so true about marketing ops? Is there one? Is there like a sort of is there a marketoonist
uh,
kind of style comic or something that just is so true?
um, I think I don't know if it's a quote or a meme or what have you, but like the one thing that came into our community literally just a couple days ago is like you're really not a seasoned marketer or marketing operations professional until you've made a mistake, what we refer to as a moops in the community. And so marketing ops oops. And it was one of our community members shared a screenshot of like some email went out from one of the technology companies and it was totally missing a bunch of data and a broken image was in it. And the community member said, "Oh, a marketing operations professional got their wings today." So I think it just makes me laugh every time because it's like you haven't been around until you've made a mistake. You're guaranteed to make one. And so that kind of stuff makes me chuckle all the time. I think we're going to create a badge or a sticker or something for it. It'll be fun.
Like MOOP certified or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Love
yeah.
it. Hey,
I got
great.
my moops wings.
Great. Sorry, Mike. I gotta bounce. I think it was a really good conversation. I want to talk more, but perhaps round two. And all the best. Hope to talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate it, man.
Just